Uh, Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Rush, and Mr. Green, Mr. Griffith, and Mr. Gardner. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and thought I might as well mention all of you. I led both NERA's study of the macroeconomic impacts of LNG exports that we did for the Department of Energy and also our recent update. I've provided a copy of this report with my testimony. I'd like to request that that be entered for the record. I'm also speaking today for myself, not for NERA or any other consultant there or any of their clients. These are my opinions. We did, as Dr. Gant mentioned, in our new study, update our data to the most recent complete Energy Information Administration Annual Energy Outlook. What Mr. Dietzel refers to as our forecasts are simply what was in AEO 2011 when we did the DOE study and 2013 in our current study. The reference case was calibrated precisely to the AEO forecast, as close as you can come. So we did the update. We also looked at higher levels of exports than we did in the previous study. We looked at the full amounts of exports that the market would take in each of the scenarios that we developed. And what we found, again, was that LNG exports would provide net economic benefits to the U.S. in all the scenarios we examined, and the less the regulators restricted U.S. exports, the greater the benefits would be. Indeed, the largest cumulative benefits were the largest net benefits were achieved when no limit was set on LNG exports by DOE. But that didn't mean that exports are unlimited because the market would limit them. And put another way, there is a sweet spot. I agree. But the sweet spot is only going to be found by letting the market work to discover it. We are not going to be able to discover a sweet spot through arguments here or through analysis. The sweet spot is the point at which the value in domestic use and the value of exports are balanced off by the market. We also find that the benefits of LNG exports will be distributed broadly, and we looked at this more carefully than we did in the previous version. Wage growth will be slightly slower, but it's not true that it's only rich landowners in Wyoming and North Dakota that will be getting the benefits. Workers benefit from increased values of their 401ks and retirement savings. Everyone benefits from a source of government revenue that doesn't retard growth. And there's the basic point of international trade that when we increase exports, it directly reduces the costs of the other imported consumer goods that people buy. So there is an offsetting effect. When we, there's a demand for our exports. As our LNG exports go up, buyers need dollars. Buyers go out and acquire those dollars. That drives the value of the dollar up. That drives down the price of all the other goods that we import. For consumers, that's what turns out to be a wash, and it's a very important part of understanding the trade implications. Now, you've heard that the chemical industry will create more GDP if it were allocated a BCF of gas than the natural gas industry would create by exporting it. That's a false dichotomy, and it's bad economics in the bargain. The same thing could be said of every industry that uses a basic commodity. For example, grocery manufacturers who use the same agricultural products that we export. Does this mean that we need to establish a law that creates a public interest requirement for determining whether agricultural exports are in our national interest? No, the market sorts that one out perfectly adequately. The whole notion that chemicals or other manufacturing industries need government allocations of energy to survive is false. There's just no problem for the government to solve. The competitive advantage of U.S. manufacturing won't be taken away by exports. I'd like to put up one slide here which shows what happened. This is the manufacturing renaissance. This is the effect of lower natural gas prices. In 2000, in the red line, the blue line shows 2005. The United States was the highest cost producer of chemicals at that point. It was really on the verge of being knocked out of business. Now we are tied with the Middle East as the lowest cost producer. We have a 60-cent a pound advantage in ethylene production over our nearest rival. So I did a calculation. I asked, what is the maximum impact that we see from natural gas exports across all our cases? It is not this fantasy that we are going to be linked to oil prices and suddenly jump to $10 or $12 a barrel. It's a $1 increase above what prices would otherwise be. That $1 increase in natural gas prices converts to 5 cents a pound on the cost of producing ethylene. That's out of a 60-cent advantage that we have already. It's true. U.S. manufacturing gets a huge advantage over its rivals in countries that have to import natural gas And we get it because our gas is so much cheaper and that there is enough for manufacturing and enough for the exports as well. In fact, when we looked at exports, we found that almost all of the increased gas for exports was coming from additional production. Almost none of it was coming from manufacturing. Manufacturing can afford to buy the gas because it has such an advantage. It's a false dichotomy to say it's an either-or. Let me show 2 other slides. This one shows that there are employment impacts, and they are positive impacts. There are direct jobs that are going to be created by building LNG facilities. We show them here that they will peak before 2018, somewhere between 2,000 to 40,000 jobs, depending on how fast we get on with the business of exporting LNG. That actually converts into reduced unemployment. A lot of talk about creating jobs and putting people to work 40 years from now is nonsense. CBO and most other forecasters assume that once we get out of this recession, we will stay approximately at full employment. What matters is between now and 2018, because that's when CBO says we will be returning to full employment. Using a standard kind of macroeconomic theory, we looked at this and determined that we would get something up to 45,000 additional workers drawn out of the unemployed and put to work at the maximum level of LNG exports that we came across. Final chart, let me show. This would have an effect on Russia. I'll leave it to others to talk about why it's our strategic advantage to do this, but what this shows is that if the United States, if we do 2 things. One is if we remove bureaucratic restrictions on exports, and the second is if we actually encourage the shale revolution rather than restricting it through ham-handed regulations or unjustified fears. We can knock out 5 trillion cubic feet of Russian exports. It won't be because we're exporting directly to Russia, to Europe. It's because we will be going where we have a transportation cost advantage to go, and others, in particular the Middle East and Africa, will be shipping their gas to Europe and knocking Russia out of that market. That will face Russia with 2 choices, and it's the choice every monopolist has to face when a competitor appears. They either have to cut back their production in order to maintain high prices, cede most of their market, or they have to take much lower prices. And we project that in the optimistic supply case that EIA has developed in 2013, we could reduce Russia's natural gas export revenues between 40% and 60% if we free up LNG exports. I think that's a significant hit to the Russian economy and one that should get their attention. Thank you for your indulgence.